Hi, everyone. I'm Thérèse, and this is New York Girl Again, The After, the podcast for caregivers who've survived the hardest chapter of their lives and are now gathering both the courage and the strength to write the next one. I'm so grateful you've chosen to spend this time with me. This week, I want to step into a solemn space because the calendar tells us it's almost September 11th. 24 years since that morning when the world shifted forever, when time itself seemed to pause, when ordinary life fractured into before and after, a day of collective grief, and for me, a day of personal loss that still echoes in my bones. It's a day we all carry, no matter who we are or where we were. For me, it's the day I lost my best friend, Linda Anne Luzzicone, who was working for Cantor Fitzgerald on the 105th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And it was also a moment inside my long caregiving journey, a moment that revealed just how much we, as caregivers, feel the pressure to hold it all together, to never break, to wear the armor, even when that armor quietly shuts out the very love and support we need most. On that morning of September 11th, 2001, I was at my parents' house in New Jersey. My dad had just come home after a 2-week hospitalization where he had come so dangerously close to death. A month after his coronary artery bypass surgery, complications set in. Congestive heart failure, respiratory failure, sudden and overwhelming like an avalanche. I can still see myself behind the wheel, racing him to the ER just 5 minutes away, flying through red lights as he shook and turned blue beside me. He was intubated right there in the ER, then transferred to the cardiac care unit. And yet, by nothing less than God's mercy, he survived against all odds. It was a beautiful full morning, wasn't it? I was at my parents' house, caring for my dad, who was home on oxygen, waiting for the visiting nurse to arrive. This was early in my caregiving journey, long before I ever imagined becoming a nurse. In fact, at the time, it wasn't even on my radar. I remember sitting on the floor beside my dad in the living room, the television on in the background, when suddenly we were confronted with the unimaginable, the horrific nightmare unfolding live before our very eyes. Very early that morning, before any of it happened, Linda had emailed me. She forwarded a funny joke that her own dad had sent her because she knew I was in desperate need of a little laugh. It was her way of saying, I'm thinking of you. I'm here for you. That was Linda, always finding a way to make me laugh, even in the hardest seasons. We met when we were just 17, both working as cashiers in a hardware store on Staten Island. I can still see her behind a register, tossing out the occasional one-liners to the customers, making even the grumpiest people crack a smile. That was her gift. She brought light everywhere she went. From the very beginning, she was a force of nature, beautiful, daring, adventurous, confident with a wicked sense of humor, kind, loving, unforgettable. She had this way of pushing me out of my introverted cocoon in the best possible ways. She'd say, "Come on, let's go." and suddenly I'd be on some adventure I never would have dared to take on my own. She was a true friend, the kind who always had my back, and those are rare. And to this day, I've never had another friend quite like her. I don't think I ever will. I remember reading that email, smiling, and then instantly thinking, she's already at work? That's really early for her. I didn't have time to respond because my dad needed help getting into the bathroom. But to this day, I still go down that rabbit hole. Why? Why did she go in early that day? If she hadn't, would she still be here? It reminds me how fragile life really is. How a single, ordinary choice in something as simple as a routine can practically bend time itself, setting into motion consequences that can never be undone. For the rest of the day, I kept calling her and calling her. I must have called her a dozen times, hoping she had somehow escaped before the collapse. Each time I got her answering machine. Each time I left a message, thinking, believing she would call me back. She always called me back. The next morning, I was with my dad in his pulmonologist's waiting room. The TV was replaying the collapse of the towers and live images of twisted steel and smoke, the haunting remnants of what was once whole just 2 days before. I was still in trauma mode, still in caregiving mode, doing what I always did, trying to stay functional. Somewhat delusional, I remember whispering to my dad, maybe she made it to the roof. If she did, maybe there's a chance she's on top of the rubble. Maybe they'll find her. Maybe they'll rescue her. I can still see him turning his head slowly toward me, the nasal cannula from his portable oxygen tank resting against his face. He looked at me with the saddest eyes, shook his head gently, and said only one word. No. A couple of weeks before 9/11, when my dad was still in the ICU, Linda wanted to travel from New York to Point Pleasant, New Jersey. A trip she would jokingly call heading out to the country, always teasing me about why I moved to no man's land. She wanted to come see me. But I told her no. I said it wasn't necessary for her to take that long train ride. I told her I was fine. The truth was, I wasn't fine. I was barely holding it together. I was making medical decisions for my father based solely on the good faith of what the doctors told me. And I knew that if she walked into that hospital room, I would have completely collapsed. And if I broke down like that, who would get my dad through this? Who would hold my mom together? No, I couldn't risk imploding. So I said no. I put on the protective armor that held me together, but kept vulnerability out. And in doing so, I let the last chance to see my best friend slip through my fingers. 24 years later, that is still one of my deepest regrets. If you've ever been a caregiver, you know this feeling. You know what it's like to put on that armor day after day, to swallow your tears, hide your exhaustion, and pretend you're stronger than you feel. Because in your mind, if you fall apart, everything else falls apart too. We become masters of the straight face. We keep the world turning, even when our own world is crumbling. But the cost is high. That armor doesn't just protect us, it isolates us. It keeps out the very people who would love us, hold us, and help us carry the weight. And then, in the after, when caregiving is over, we're left with regrets. We remember the moments we said no, the times we pushed people away, the times we chose strength over connection. And the silence of those regrets can echo louder than the caregiving itself. My regret with Linda isn't just about missing one visit. It's about the bigger truth. I didn't let myself be human, to be vulnerable. I didn't let her see me break. And now I'll never get that chance. The irony is, Linda didn't need me to be strong. She didn't need me to be polished or perfect. She just wanted to be there, to sit with me in the rubble. That's what true friends do. They don't need you invincible. They just want you real. And so here I am, 24 years later, in the after of my long caregiving journey, trying to honor her by doing things differently, by loosening the armor, by letting people in, even when it scares me, even when they sometimes fail me, by admitting when I can't hold it all together, and remembering that sometimes falling apart is exactly what we need. And I want to encourage my fellow caregivers and all of you listening to think about your Lindas, the ones you've lost, the ones who are still here, the people who showed up, and the ones you wish you had let in. What would it look like to take off that armor just for a moment and let them see you as you are? September 11th will always be etched in our hearts and minds, not only as a day of unimaginable loss, but as a reminder of what it means to be human together. That day showed us the depths of sorrow and the strength of connection. It revealed how fragile life can be, and yet how fiercely we can love, support, and carry one another through the unthinkable. And for caregivers, there's a truth here too. We're taught to hold it all together, to be unshakable, to never break. But the reality is, we are human. And it is okay to be vulnerable sometimes, both during and after the caregiving journey. Because when we take off the armor, even just for a moment, we discover that we are never truly alone. We find our strength in being human together. If this episode spoke to you, please share it with a current or former caregiver who may need the reminder that it's okay to be vulnerable, that it's okay to be human. And I'd love for you to join our growing community at newyorkgirlagain.com and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram at New York Girl Again. I'm Thérèse, and this is New York Girl Again The After. Thank you for remembering with me.